I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into HR and saw Marcus sitting there stinking up the glass with his drugstore cologne. It was Thursday morning, the week before Thanksgiving, and I was still wearing my fall bride hoodie and sipping from a mug that said, "Future Mrs. Avery." Charming, right? Except nothing. After that was charming. Marcus didn't even glance up. At first just rustled papers, like this was a routine check-in, and not the corporate version of being shoved into oncoming traffic. When he finally did look at me, it was with that plasticky, forced smile people use when they're about to tell you the dog ran away, but also it was their fault. "We're going to have to let you go," he said like he was canceling a coffee order. I blinked at him like he'd just spoken in Morse code. "It's not personal," he added quickly. "Just budget timing. You know how it is?" Oh, I knew exactly how it was. My end-of-year bonus, $27,000 pre-tax, was set to vest in 48 hours. Saturday. At midnight, to be exact. Marcus knew it. HR knew it. Probably the guy who cleans out the vending machines knew it. This wasn't budget timing. This was premeditated spreadsheet-backed theft with a bar chart defense. And if you're listening and feel that little burn in your chest, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. Seriously, 97% of y'all listen without subscribing, and every new sub is like a middle finger to people like Marcus. That fuels this tiny engine of justice we've built. And trust me, it's running hot. Anyway, I sat there stunned while he talked about restructuring, cost-cutting, how he fought for me. I barely heard a word. I just stared at the man who lit my dignity on fire and watched it burn like a candle at a cheap wedding reception. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. I signed the papers, my signature sharp and furious like a lie detector in crisis. Then I walked out, silent, straight into the elevator, staring at my reflection eyes, puffy, jaw locked. My heart caught between run and burn it all down. Holding a manila folder full of severance paperwork and a complimentary slap from corporate America. But it wasn't the money that hit me hardest. Not exactly. It was the math, the strategy, the cold surgical betrayal. Marcus had waited for the exact window, Thursday, before Thanksgiving weekend. Just late enough to wreck everything. Just early enough to dodge legal blowback. "It's not personal," he said, but it was precise. I sat in my Camry with the engine running. No music, no calls. Just me and the stale hum of the AC and the echo of my future self screaming through the windshield. I wasn't going to ruin my wedding. Not for Marcus, not for his sad little ego or his Excel-based treachery, but I wasn't going to let it slide either. Not yet. Not loudly. But the fuse had been lit. And when the fire reached the end, it wouldn't be me standing in the ashes. It would be Marcus. The rehearsal dinner was held at a vineyard just outside Asheville, overpriced and drenched in eucalyptus and upper-class delusion. Everyone kept hugging me like I was a porcelain doll, clinking glasses and saying things like, "This is your weekend, darling." They didn't know. Not my mother already, tipsy on cranberry sangria and weeping into her butternut salad. Not my best friend, Maggie Maid of Honor, shrimp skewer enforcer, and the only person who could match my sarcasm, beat for beat. Not even James, my fiancé, who kept shooting me winks across the table like we were sharing some private joke. I hadn't told him. I couldn't. Not yet. Not while he was glowing, tux-fitted, and surrounded by the people who loved him and wanted this to be flawless. I wasn't going to smear my corporate trauma across the appetizers. Maggie slid into the seat beside me during the salad course and leaned in. "You good?" I smiled too fast. "Just nerves." She narrowed her eyes. "You sure you've got that look again?" "What look? The Karen from finance is first on my hit list." "Look," I laughed. It sounded like a fork snapping in half. "I'm fine, Mags." She didn't believe me, but she let it go. And the night kept moving without me. Replaying Marcus's voice in my head like some kind of deranged meditation track. It's not personal, just timing. Around 10 p.m., I slipped into the powder room and locked the door behind me, sat on the marble counter in my 2 white rehearsal dress, and pulled up the PDF of my contract on my phone. Found it in under a minute. Clause 14C bonus payout. Vests annually on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Termination prior to that date results in forfeiture. Marcus hadn't just fired me. He'd timed it, stalked the calendar like a scavenger bird with a spreadsheet. No budget crisis, no emergency, just a plan. One he'd been grooming for weeks, maybe months. I could picture him now, alone in his glass cubicle, hunched over his keyboard, probably grinning like a low-budget Bond villain, while my bonus ticked upward like a countdown. And just like that, the fog in my head cleared. Cold, sharp, like winter wind through bare branches. I wasn't going to torch my wedding night with this fire. Not yet. But I also wasn't going to forget. Through the window, I saw the patio lights twinkling like the inside of a snow globe. James was laughing with his dad, Richard Avery, CEO of Avery Tech, the man whose contracts practically funded my old firm's Q4. A man who respected me, adored his son, and thought I was still gainfully employed in a stable role. I hadn't told him. Not because I was afraid, but because a weapon that powerful isn't thrown. It's placed. Intentionally. Everyone's watching. You don't light the match until the room is full. I slid off the counter, smoothed the fabric at my waist, and met my own eyes in the mirror. They didn't look broken anymore. They looked focused, surgical. Tomorrow I'd walk down the aisle. I'd kiss James under fairy lights and pretend like nothing happened. But something had. I wasn't porcelain anymore. I was tempered glass. The wedding was flawless, annoyingly so. Sunshine, perfect vows, tears at all the right moments. Even Aunt Tilly kept her pyramid scheme off the record, but beneath the curated perfection, I was holding something sharp. And I smiled every time someone said, "You must be over the moon." Marcus probably signed my termination paperwork with that smug little grin, probably practicing his fake condolences in the mirror while microwaving a lean cuisine. Still, I played the part. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button, not just to support the story, but to see what happens when silence turns into strategy and strategy into something they never saw coming. I posed, I twirled, I clinked champagne flutes and kissed James like I wasn't mentally crafting a revenge fantasy involving a malfunctioning printer and a conveniently locked conference room. The reception was winding down when I found myself near the edge of the dance floor, slice of almond raspberry cake in one hand, flute of something bubbly in the other. Richard Avery stood beside me, swirling a glass of Scotch eyes, fixed on James and his groomsmen, attempting synchronized worm moves with the grace of tranquilized seals. Richard speaks in spreadsheets, tailored suits, bottom-line language. He's the kind of man who treats silence like strategy. And tonight, for once, he looked relaxed. Tie loosened, laugh lines breaking the usual mask. "You pulled off quite the party," he said, gesturing toward the fairy-lit chaos. I nodded, chewing cake that was so sweet it made my molars pulse. Then the words just came out, "I got fired yesterday." I didn't plan it. Maybe I was just done carrying it alone. Maybe I needed someone in the room to see the whole picture just once. Richard turned slowly like a hawk locking onto movement. "Come again." Marcus let me go. Thursday morning. Said it was a budget issue. I took a slow sip. My bonus was set to vest Saturday. 27 grand. He didn't blink. Just stared, all quiet calculation and internal math. "And James doesn't know?" he asked. "Not yet." I didn't want to ruin the weekend. He turned back toward the dance floor. James had shifted into air guitar mode, hair a mess. Cheeks flushed. "A proud moment," Richard murmured, sipping his scotch. Then he said simply, "I'll make a note." That was it. No gasps, no hand-wringing. Just 4 words. I didn't ask for help. Didn't beg for justice. I just needed to say it out loud to mark it real. But Richard Avery doesn't make notes like some intern with a sticky pad. When he makes a note, someone gets audited. We stood quietly as the bass from the DJ booth rattled our glasses. Someone yelled, "Shots near the bar." The photographer scurried past us, chasing the flower girl and her frosting-stained hands. Then Richard gently clinked his glass against mine and gave the smallest nod. For the first time since Thursday morning, something flickered in my chest. Not hope, something more dangerous. Possibility. I didn't know what Richard was planning. Didn't need to. I'd said my piece. Now the game had changed. The Monday after the wedding, Marcus strolled into the office like he'd just solved inflation with a Google sheet, and he brought donuts. That was his tell. Marcus never brought donuts unless he was cleaning up after something shady. Jelly-filled hush money. Maple glazed guilt. He paraded around the bullpen like a game show host, tossing sugary bribes and grinning like he hadn't just gutted someone for hitting their bonus quota. Sometimes leadership means hard calls, he said loudly near the Keurig machine. But hey, I just saved the department $30K. That's how you stay lean, people. Backslaps, awkward chuckles, raised eyebrows. No one knew the full story. Just whispers. That I'd been let go the week of my wedding, bad optics. Marcus spun it like I'd chosen personal priorities over professional commitment. Claimed I'd been quietly disengaging for months. That lie made Susan from billing raise an eyebrow so high it almost filed for early retirement. But then the tremors started. Quiet at first. Accounting got a flagged email from the VP of Finance marked urgent. A full audit of all vendor contracts tied to Avery Tech. Every invoice, every quote, every discrepancy for the past 18 months. Legal was suddenly living in back-to-back meetings, red pens, and hand-locked door expressions. HR started digging through Q2 terminations, asking about Slack messages, exit documents, timelines. People noticed. People always notice. Offices are petri dishes of paranoia wrapped in recycled air. By Wednesday, Marcus was sweating in meetings and snapping at the intern about PowerPoint fonts. By Thursday, 2 men from corporate compliance walked in, no ties, no small talk. Their silence made the air feel radioactive. No one said my name, but I was there. The ghost in the spreadsheets, the shadow in the glass. And me? I was home. Honeymoon postponed, hair full of glitter, wearing James's hoodie, sipping cold coffee, refreshing the company org chart like it was a true crime Reddit thread. Just watching, waiting. Maggie texted me Thursday night. Maggie, you hear about Marcus's budget meeting getting canceled last minute. Me, nope. Why Maggie Legal kicked everyone out. CFO's assistant was crying. Something's up. I wanted to say I know, but I didn't. I hadn't spoken to Richard since the wedding reception. No follow-up, no cryptic texts, just silence. But not the kind that means nothing, the kind that means something's loading. Watching my old workplace from the outside felt surreal, like shaking a snow globe and seeing the plastic town start to tip sideways. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt this low-growing hum beneath my ribs, like sitting on a porch, watching thunderclouds roll in, knowing I left the patio umbrella open. Marcus thought he'd won. Thought he'd padded his Q4 and polished his review score. Thought he could slash me from the books like a line item and still sleep at night. But Marcus never understood 2 things. 1. Not everything is tracked in the employee portal. 2. You don't mess with someone whose father-in-law could buy your job title with cash and still tip 20%. The tremors were just the start. The quake was coming. The envelope arrived Thursday afternoon. Thick, heavy, no return address. Just my name printed in crisp serif font, like it had something to prove. Inside a formal invitation to the Avery Tech Annual Strategy Summit, navy and silver embossing. RSVP already marked confirmed. One detail stood out: front row seat section marked executive guests. I sat frozen on the couch, still wearing leggings and a face mask, holding that card like it might detonate. James peeked over my shoulder. Dad invited you, apparently, he said, grinning. Guess you're big leagues now. I smiled, but my stomach coiled tight. This wasn't courtesy, wasn't family protocol, wasn't accidental. This was placement. Richard Avery doesn't do half measures. He doesn't reserve front row seats for decor. If you're in his line of sight, you're part of the plan or the takedown. The summit was set for Monday. Venue downtown hotel, valet only. Chandeliers that looked like galaxies turned upside down. Something was coming, and I was already in the room. I'd been to the summit once before last year. Back then, I wore a coffee-stained blazer and a name tag that said Data Strategy, Regional. I stood in the back with the other analytics managers sipping bad hotel coffee, pretending to be invisible, while the execs clinked glasses and swapped lies. This year, I'd be in the front row. Not as an employee, not even as a guest, as a statement. I didn't ask Richard for details. No texts, no breadcrumb hunting. A part of me didn't want confirmation. I didn't want hope. Hope is messy. It opens doors to disappointment. I didn't need that. I marked the summit date in my calendar, picked out a blazer sharp enough to cut steel, and booked a blowout. If I was going to be a chess piece, I'd damn well be the queen. Maggie called Friday night. "You're really going? Already RSVP'd. What do you think it means?" I hesitated. "I think Marcus is about to learn what 27 grand really costs." She let out a low whistle. "You're terrifying. I love it." The weekend dragged. Every new email from my old company felt like a fracture in a dam. Maggie sent me screenshots, Marcus asking comms for PR language on unexpected vendor realignment. Char from HR requesting clarification on termination timelines. I didn't reply. I just watched. Like a game of chess I wasn't even playing, but somehow winning. James didn't ask questions. That's one of his quiet gifts. He knows when silence isn't absence, it's strategy. Monday morning, I dressed like I was headed into battle. Black slacks, navy blazer, simple earrings, wedding ring glinting like a warning shot. I walked into that downtown hotel like I belonged because I did. The lobby buzzed with suits and lanyards, business cards tucked into two firm handshakes. Familiar faces from my old company were there, drinking too early, laughing too loud. I spotted Marcus near the espresso bar, gesturing like he was still relevant. He didn't see me. Not yet, but he would. My seat front row, center aisle, directly across from the podium. And Richard Avery hadn't even taken the stage yet. The cocktail hour throbbed with self-importance waiters with crab cakes on slate trays, champagne laughter, and ambition that smelled like expensive cologne. I sipped club soda, silent. Watching. Logos. Legacy. The people I used to report to were here nursing bourbons, flexing inflated titles, all pretending they had any idea what Q1 would actually look like. That's when Maggie texted me. "Maggie, you're gonna love this. Marcus just told the CTO you were emotional dead weight. Said firing you proved he wasn't afraid to make tough calls." The words hit like a punch through silk. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over reply. I could have marched across the ballroom and gutted him with precision, syllable by syllable, in front of his precious executive circle. But I didn't. I slipped the phone into my clutch and took another slow sip. Let him preen. Let him gloat. Let him keep believing for one more hour that he was the wolf and not the carcass. Across the room, I saw Marcus swirling a glass of red wine, like he was conducting a solo symphony of his own importance. Two junior execs from sales nodded along, clearly hoping to ride the fumes of his perceived power. He didn't see me yet, but others did. Karen from data engineering spotted me first, blinked twice like I was a software glitch. Then Paul from marketing, the one who wears sneakers with suits like that's still edgy. Their eyes dropped to my name tag, silver, not paper. Then to the placard in my hand, VIP reserved. I could feel the whispers spreading across the room like ink spilled in water. Is that her? Didn't she get fired? Why is she here? They didn't know how to categorize me. I wasn't supposed to be here, not in this section, not on this level. I was a footnote, a past tense, email, a desk already reassigned. And yet here I was. Tailored wool, steady heels, not clinging to relevance, but radiating precision. I felt like a warning label no one wanted to read. Somewhere between the foie gras crostini and the truffle-dusted mushroom tarts, the energy shifted. Slight, but sharp. If you weren't looking, you missed it. But I was looking. The smiles thinned. The eye contact tightened. Phones started lighting up in laps. The CTO left early. Ops VP drained her third wine like cough syrup. And Marcus, he bragged, cutting costs, staying lean, making smart calls before Q2. Then he joked loud enough for Maggie to catch it. Weddings don't pay invoices. Open headcount does. Aimed at me? What he didn't know, I knew who was giving the keynote. I knew exactly what seat I'd been placed in. I knew why Richard Avery hadn't said a word since that night under the fairy lights and almond wedding cake. And I knew Marcus had just built his gallows out of words he couldn't unsay. So I said nothing. Not a single word. Just sipped my club soda and watched the house of cards tremble brick by smug, lying brick. The lights dimmed just enough to silence the room. The air turned dense the way it does, before a thunderstorm charged crackling too still to trust. People drained their glasses with nervous hands. The string quartet slipped into silence. Phones disappeared into pockets. Heads turned toward the stage. Richard Avery stepped up to the podium like a man with nowhere else to be because he was exactly where he needed to be. Charcoal gray suit tailored within an inch of precision. A vintage watch that didn't say rich, it said legacy. The CEO of my old firm sat 2 chairs left of the stage. I'd met him once. Blow-dried hair, eyes like litigation. He smiled at Richard like they were still on the same team. But that smile never reached his eyes. Richard adjusted the mic, cleared his throat. His voice when it came was smooth, measured. The kind of voice that makes lawyers sit up straighter and investors stop chewing. "Thank you all for being here today," he began. He nodded toward the hosts. "A well-executed summit. I see many familiar faces. Colleagues, partners, family." I sat still in the front row. Spine straight, wedding ring flashing under the lights, heart ticking like a silent metronome. From where I sat, I could see it all. The CEO's twitchy hands. Marcus leaning on a high top like he owned the air supply. My former department heads clutching lanyards like school kids waiting for detention. Richard eased through the expected points: market trends, digital evolution, agile resilience, polished harmless, corporate wallpaper. And then he paused. A breath. A silence. Then the shift. That said, Richard said, voice cooling. "We're making a strategic change to our supplier relationships. Effective immediately, Avery Tech will terminate all contracts with Langston and Burke." 1,000 tiny sounds followed. Shuffling. Coughs. Phones lighting up. And Marcus, frozen mid-sip. Glass halfway to his lips. Like time had forgotten him. "We no longer trust the leadership decisions being made at Langston and Burke." Richard added his voice even. "And as such, we no longer believe our interests are best served by this partnership." He didn't look at anyone in particular. He didn't need to. Every head turned toward Marcus. His face went slack like someone had unplugged the smug and left the shell standing. Near the catering table, a fork hit the floor with a sharp clang. I saw Paul from marketing slowly rotate in his chair, his mouth forming a soundless, "Oh!" Phones began lighting up, texts firing, screens being tilted away for privacy. One guy in the back tapped his smartwatch like he was checking for a pulse. The CEO of Langston and Burke stood abruptly heading for the podium, but Richard raised one hand, calm, deliberate. Not loud, not aggressive, just final. "We thank Langston and Burke for their years of service," he said, "and we wish them clarity and accountability in the months ahead." Then he stepped back from the mic. He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. He descended the stairs, each footstep sharp and slow, like the echo of a verdict. He passed by the first row and paused. Briefly, he placed one hand on my shoulder, a silent acknowledgement, then kept walking. No applause, no dramatic gasp, just the quiet sound of a corporate empire cracking at the seams. Marcus still hadn't moved. His bourbon sloshed in his glass like it wanted to flee. His mouth opened, then closed. Nothing came out. And me? I just sat there, still, silent, a calm witness to a man watching his kingdom fall apart. The collapse didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like vibration phones buzzing like hornets on hardwood, whispered curses, chairs scraping back a little too quickly. It was chaos, corporate style, collars still pressed, smiles still pasted, but underneath, full meltdown. The Langston and Burke CEO scrambled to the mic like a man sprinting into fire with a fistful of glitter. "We want to thank Mr. Avery for his candor." He didn't finish. The room was already checking screens, texting updates, slipping out one by one like the building was leaking gas. From my seat, I watched it unravel. Maggie texted Marcus just got pulled into conference room B. Legal finance COO. It's happening. Maggie, the CEO's assistant, is crying. Maggie, oh my God. I didn't reply. I crossed one leg over the other, slow, deliberate, and folded my hands in my lap like I was watching a particularly compelling opera. People I hadn't seen in weeks kept sneaking glances at me. Some whispered behind their name badges. Others looked away when our eyes met. I wasn't just the ex-employee anymore. I was the axis around which the whole disaster now rotated. Marcus came stumbling out of the side hallway 20 minutes later. Blazer off, shirt untucked. His face was pale, but his neck was crimson, like embarrassment couldn't decide where to land. He scanned the room like he didn't remember how he got there. Then he saw me and froze. We locked eyes. There it was, that flicker of understanding. This wasn't random. His little cost-cutting ambush hadn't disappeared into the HR void. Someone had spoken, and someone had listened. He was the liability now. He took a step toward me, half unsure, but one of the legal directors touched his arm, said something low and urgent. He hesitated, then turned and followed them. Smart move. The rest of the summit unraveled into broken pieces. Breakout sessions were canceled. The happy hour disappeared from the schedule. Brand banners were rolled up and wheeled away like flags after a corporate funeral. I stayed seated, still silent, still watching. Across the room, one of the senior partners was in a low, sharp exchange with the COO. I caught the phrase fiduciary breach and watched the COO's mouth tighten like he'd just bit into a lemon made of legal threats. A junior analyst rushed past, laptop in hand, sweat dotting his collar. Marcus didn't return. And the CEO gone, vanished behind a locked door with 2 board members and a glass of something that wasn't water. The company was in full-blown damage control. As for me, I finished my club soda, stood slowly, and smoothed the fabric of my blazer. The overhead lights flickered like even the electricity knew something had ended. No apologies, no spin. Because everyone already knew. Marcus had tried to save $27,000 by cutting someone he thought was disposable, and it cost him everything. Now the glass was half empty and my hands no longer trembled. My wedding ring caught the ballroom lights like it had been waiting for this exact moment. The room had quieted. No more clinking glasses, no more networking hum, just low murmurs, side glances, that eerie drone of consequence vibrating just under the surface like a silent alarm only the guilty could hear. Richard Avery stepped down from the stage without pause. No folder. No entourage, just him composed and surgical, like he hadn't just severed a $20 million partnership with less emotion than most people give a dinner toast. He walked straight toward me, hand extended not for performance, not for theater, but because it was done. Final. We shook hands. Simple. Measured. No applause, no cameras. Just that thick silence of knowing eyes. The moment scorched itself into the company's memory like a scar they'd never scrub out. Marcus reappeared 3 minutes later, flanked by 2 suited men. Polite, plain-faced, corporate cleanup crew. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't resisting. He looked hollow. All that remained was his name badge, which one of the men quietly removed as they approached the exit. I caught a phrase as they passed pair board directive. Immediate termination. Contractual breach. Marcus didn't look at me. That was the tell. Not defiance, not anger. Just the quiet shame of a man realizing his throne was a $99 office chair, bolted to borrowed power. By the exit, the same HR rep who once handed me my severance packet blinked when our eyes met. She was trying to place me. She couldn't, because I'd become someone else. For once, I wasn't holding the weight of what happened. I wasn't explaining it, folding it into a lesson, or trying to turn it into strength. I didn't feel vindicated or angry, just finished. I stood tucked in my chair and nodded once toward Richard. He returned it. Quiet. Final. Some contracts aren't written in ink. They're written in consequence. As I walked past the stage, someone whispered my name. I didn't stop. The city outside kept moving, horns honked, heels clicked. And somewhere, someone had just hit send on the first memo trying to spin this disaster into opportunity. But the truth was simple. Marcus tried to save $27,000. And it cost him $20 million. If you've made it this far, thank you. Really. I didn't tell this story. For pity, I told it, so someone out there remembers. They're not crazy for noticing the injustice, the manipulation, the calculated cruelty. If you saw yourself in any part of this, drop me a comment. Tell me how you would have handled it or how you did. And if you felt that moment where the quiet became power, hit that like button. Subscribe if you believe that being underestimated is sometimes your sharpest advantage. Because I'm done carrying shame, and maybe it's time you put yours down too.